Deep within the darkest shadows of the most toxic swamp of Tveland lies a blasphemous altar, clutched by roots and scarred with ancient heretical symbols. It will grant whatever wish one wants, if only one asks. All that you must do in order to reach it is to brave the swamp itself. It broods with toxic snakes and the demented cultists who worship them, in addition to a witch. Cursed walker, will you travel there? Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and this is a new series. I really enjoy running Mörk Borg, and I really love the flavor of its one-shot adventures. I want to do a guide to the very best of them, because I really don't see a lot of guides for individual adventures and how to run them, and I think those guides are needed because these adventures are easy to misinterpret or to run the wrong way. So, I was going to call this series Mörk Borg How To, but instead, in the spirit of the heavy metal proliferation of umlauts, we're going to call this series Mörk Borg Heretic. And today's installment covers Sepulchre of the Swamp Witch. Written by Christian Solane, I hope I'm saying that right, with a map and art by Jonathan Knorr. This is a classic Mörk Borg one-shot, and you can find it in the 2022 supplement Heretic. Before I proceed any further, I am going to spoil this entire thing, and I'm going to do so rather quickly. So, if you were hoping to play in this one-shot, stop watching now, but please share this video with your GM or DM so that they can get a few of my tips instead. Okay, so before we proceed room by room and talk about how to run the individual encounters, it's really important to have an overview of just what on earth this adventure is. The adventure does have an altar that grants wishes, and the altar does appear on the other side of the dungeon from the entrance, and in between the PC's starting point and the altar there are a bunch of demented, awful cultists. So it's tempting to think that the PCs must fight their way to the altar. But this is wrong. This is wrong. This is not the way to run this dungeon, because that's not what the dungeon is about. Here's how the dungeon actually works. Once the PCs find the altar, which they can do with relative ease, they discover that in order to earn a wish from it, they need to sacrifice the life of an unwilling person. An unwilling human being needs to be killed at the altar in order to gain a wish. So that's what the dungeon is about. Is that gross and disgusting and evil and bad and awful and wrong? Yes, it's human sacrifice, it's awful. But fortunately, the dungeon is full of even more awful human cultists who you can pick from. And that's really what the dungeon is about, is this horrible layer of awful cultists, and the PCs have easy access to an altar, and the altar, in order to be activated, just needs human sacrifice. So the PCs just need to roleplay their way around, finding a cultist and abducting them or forcing them or, getting them over to the altar and then killing them. That's basically what the dungeon is. That's what it is at rock bottom. So this is why you might have been puzzled if you tried to run this dungeon as a fight your way to the end goal situation. No sooner than your PCs reach the altar, which they could do without really fighting, you discover that the real drama is over who they're gonna kill in order to get a wish from this thing. That's Mörk Borg. It's heavy metal horror, which is so horrific that it's comedic. This is a dungeon where the PCs commit human sacrifice. So that's one thing to mention about this dungeon, is that really what it is, it's sort of a roleplay arena for finding a human cultist and killing them. The other thing that's worth noting is the drug aspect of this adventure. At the very beginning, and also at another point later, PCs have the opportunity to take a drug or to get drugged by a certain kind of snake. And once they do, or if they do, they not only hallucinate some really cool things that are fun to describe, but they also notice certain secret passages around the dungeon that you can't otherwise notice. So what this means is that if you're going to use the map that comes with this adventure, and especially if you're going to use it on a virtual tabletop, you're going to want to block off the passages that you can only see if you're on drugs, give each one a door on the lighting layer that looks like a wall, basically, and be ready to send a lot of whispers if only one or if only a minority of party members end up getting drugged. Because of the drug nature of this dungeon, in other words, you might have a situation where players are all in the same area, but they see a different number of doors leading out. So think about how you want to handle that. I think theater of the mind might actually make this part easier. It's also worth noting how deadly combat is in this place. There are a lot of cultists that all worship the same snake deity or the same snakes or whatever, and they help each other out, and they all have armor, and so it's a guaranteed party wipe if the PCs just decide to strut on in there and start killing cultists. This means that if you expect your PCs to try to do that and you want them to survive, you're going to want to nerf all of these cultists. You want to remove their armor and take their hit points down a notch. You also want to attract your PCs to the idea of, and reward them for entertaining ideas about, abducting cultists with some subtlety, or disposing of them with some degree of subtlety. And in fact, you might want to point their attention to, or make sure that they consider, if they've discovered it, that room full of drug-addled, sleeping, passed-out cultists, because that's a pretty opportune stash right there of potential human sacrifices. The titular Swamp Witch of Sepulchre of the Swamp Witch is also very, very, very deadly. The PCs don't have to fight it or encounter it, but it's another one of these creatures that could easily just kill off a party without even breaking a sweat. So overall, remember that these cultists should be disgusting, wretched, horrible individuals. That makes them okay to sacrifice, but they're also friendly. The cultists are horrible, but friendly. That's how you want to run the cultists here. Horrible, but friendly. That means that combat isn't emphasized, but killing them is okay. So, room by room, the PCs start outside of this cultist lair in Area 1, appropriately. There's a snake, and the snake offers to bite the PCs in order to let them go in. This is an opportunity for the PCs to take the drug that allows them not only to hallucinate in every area, but sometimes see doors that you can't see otherwise. And the PCs, of course, are free to either take the offer or not. What's funny about this encounter is that the snake not only talks, and not only offers to bite the PCs and drug them effectively, but the snake also says that it's impossible to enter the chamber, it's impossible to enter the door that she guards without being bitten, and she's lying. So it's really weird. The snake is like, you cannot open this door unless I bite you. And if you just ignore the snake and open the door, it opens just fine. So what's the snake going to do? Just be like, well, right? Like, it's almost comedic, but that's okay, because Mörk Borg is secretly a comedy game, too. I would have the snake attack if the PCs open the door without any of them being bitten. It's a dangerous monster, but one that the PCs can actually kill, especially together if it's just many opponents against that one snake. Area 2 features a few cultists who have the munchies, and so they're eating some alligator stew or some roast alligator or something. The adventure says that the cultists are friendly if at least 2 PCs are tripping on snake venom, but I would just have them be friendly regardless. The cultists are drug-addled on snake venom themselves, they offer the PCs a seat, they talk about their nonsense snake theology if asked, but, in the distracted way that an intoxicated person might. And here's the first sort of drug enlightenment moment. Any PCs that are on snake venom can see a doorway that's leading into the head cultist's chamber. They also see the puddles of various slime and filth around the chamber glowing and sparkling as if it were magical. And other than the door leading east that only drugged-out PCs can see, there's a door leading west to where a bunch of cultists are passed out, and also a passage leading to the northeast where it leads to this worship area. In Area 3, where there's a bunch of passed-out cultists, that's basically it. It's a dark room with a bunch of passed-out cultists. They're all high on snake venom, or tired from being high on snake venom. One thing that's kind of neat in here is if any PCs are on snake venom themselves, they hallucinate a huge lizard that's like sitting on top of a pillow and glowing, and if they go over to where the lizard is, it like jumps into a wall. It just like vanishes into a wall like Casper the Friendly Ghost or something. But underneath that very pillow, there's a bag of silver. Kind of neat, right? Like, follow your drug-addled mind to a bag of silver or whatever. From that room, in addition for the passageway to the east leading back into the chamber where the cultists are eating alligator, there's a passage leading to this other worship area with a pit to the north, Area 6. Now, if the PCs head east from Area 2 through the door that only a drugged-out PC on snake venom can see, they encounter the most deadly encounter, or second most deadly encounter in this dungeon. This is Scale Hunter Eth. Scale Hunter Eth is the leader of these snake cultists, and he's a fanatic, and he's permanently high on snake venom. What makes him dangerous is that he's a formidable combatant, one that can easily kill PCs, and who can take a real beating himself, and who will call other cultists to his aid. But in addition to all that, interacting with him will likely lead to combat. Because here's how ETH interacts with the PCs. He immediately demands that they start worshipping the snake gods with him, and if the PCs fail or relent in any way, if they even hesitate, he starts attacking them and trying to subdue them as human sacrifices. So Area 4 is a room that's basically spring-loaded for a TPK. I handled this situation by making ETH a little bit more comical. I kept him as a fanatic, but I made his fanaticism a little bit more flexible, and he was a little bit more willing to interpret whatever the PCs did as a kind of worship, as long as they didn't directly defy him or insult him or anything like that. And even if they defied him or insulted him, it's sort of like, what did you say? Right? There's like an opportunity to, make sure that you really, really want combat and that that's what you're asking for. So beware Scalemaster ETH in Area 4. Now from Area 4, there's a passage to the north, and it leads to a doorway that you can only see if you're on Snake Venom, but if you go through that, you end up in the same worship chamber that you would end up if you headed northeast from Area 2, where the cultists are eating alligator. This is Area 5, the Worship Hall, and like Area 4, this is an area that could trigger some violence or could trigger combat, but in this case the combat would come from the PCs. Because what they see here are 3 large cages that have miserable human prisoners in there, and those prisoners are awaiting sacrifice as victims. Guarding those cages are several cultists, a couple of whom are really tough. They're a special tough kind of cultist. And we also get the horrific, hilarious detail that there's a blanket that's filthy in the center of the room with a couple of masturbating cultists on it. Thanks, Mörk Borg. Anyway, when the PCs come into this room, they might see the miserable prisoners in the cages and want to free them and act like heroes and stuff, but this would probably lead to their deaths. The cultists are tough, there's a lot of them in this room, and they could also call other cultists from other parts of this dungeon to help them. It just wouldn't work. So the PCs should be careful not to try to free those prisoners. If they want to survive, that is. Now, if you're not hopped up on snake venom, the only way out of Area 5 seems to be the passage that leads to the southwest. But if you're on snake venom, you also see the passage to the south that leads to Area 4 with Scalemaster ETH, and you also see a passage to the west. This western passage leads to Area 6, and you can also reach Area 6 if you just go straight north from Area 3, where the passed out cultists are. Area 6 is called the Snake Pit, appropriately because there's a huge pit in the center, and at the bottom of that pit are a bunch of snakes. This is an area where human beings, victims, are ritualistically sacrificed for the purposes of snake theology, and there's a tough cultist here who could even explain this to the PCs. There's also a large snake in here that's very much like the Emerald Serpent from Area 1, the one that could talk and offered to bite the PCs and drug them. This one here, too, can talk to the PCs and offers to bite them and drug them. So it's a second opportunity for the PCs to get hopped up on snake venom if they so wish. And at this point that might be in their interest, because if they are hopped up on snake venom, they can also see to the north of Area 6 a passageway that leads into some kind of garden. And what's cool is that as part of the hallucination, or rather part of the drug-induced revealing, the passage itself, or the archway, looks like the mouth of a colossal snake, so they'd be like walking through a snake mouth to go into this garden. That's to the north. There's also the snake pit itself. It turns out that if the PCs go down in there and fight some snakes, or defend themselves from snakes, or endure some snakes, there's a door and a passage that leads out of the pit into some other subterranean chamber. Now what's interesting is Area 7 is a garden, Area 8 is a garden-like area called Hidden Ferns, and there's a passage between them that connects them that you can only see if you're on snake venom. Now 8 can be found without being on snake venom, you just need to go down into the snake pit and go down the passage. But what's interesting is that Area 8 has a bunch of snakes, these adders, that will attack you if you're not hopped up on snake venom. Like they can tell whether you're on drugs or not, and if you're sober, they'll bite you. In addition, Area 8 has a treasure. There's something lying in the ferns. It's a trident that's really powerful. It's a cool magic item called the Croaking Trident. The trident deals a d10 plus a d4 damage, and that's a lot in Mörk Borg, but it has a hidden curse, too. The more creatures that someone kills with the trident, the more the trident's owner turns into a hideous frog monster. After 5 kills, they have noticeably bulging froggy eyes. After 8 kills or so, they stoop and are scaly and have the glistening skin of an amphibian. And then by 13 kills, it's all over, they're a frog monster. So that's the croaking trident. It's pretty cool. If the PCs pick it up, they should probably know about its benefits immediately, but you shouldn't tell them about its drawbacks. That's something that they kind of discover if they use it. Also, there's another downside to picking up this trident. If the PCs are carrying it, and they walk past a pair of creatures in the northeastern corner of the map, those creatures will attack them and probably just wipe the whole party. That's the most deadly part of this dungeon, is those things. Or one of the most deadly parts of this dungeon. As for Area 7, it's just a garden. It's got some lovely flowers and ferns, and if the PCs look, they notice that there's a lot of human skulls around here too, which is kind of creepy. But there aren't any direct threats in Area 7. It's kind of an opportunity for the PCs to take a breather, as it were. And it makes me think of that essay, I think, by Wolfgang Bauer called Empty Rooms and the Rhythm of a Dungeon, or something like that. There's something to be said for the rhythm of dungeon exploration and an empty room here and there. Area 7 is one of those. In Area 9, we have the titular Swamp Witch for this adventure. She's really cool. She floats up in the air, and in the place of her face and head, there's like this black cloud, and you can just see a couple of gleaming eyes within it, and she has this giant Final Fantasy VII sword strapped to her back, and she's floating in the air in the middle of what looks like a Stonehenge-esque ruin. And the cool thing about her is, she could kill the PCs with ease, but has no reason to attack them immediately. Instead, she's going to, like Gozer the Gozarian or whatever, she's going to ask the PCs if they seek the altar. A question which I assume they'll answer in the affirmative. And if so, she will encourage the PCs to find it and use it. It's in Area 10, literally the next room, easy to find. And she's going to tell the PCs how to use it. She's going to specify that they need to sacrifice an unwilling human life in order to gain a wish at the altar. And this is actually the point at which the PCs discover this fact about the adventure. Up until now, they just know that they were seeking an altar and that they need to pass through the territory of some snake cultists in order to find it. They could have found this out from talking to the other cultists, especially if they were talking with Scalemaster Eth. But if they didn't bother to ask about this so far, they learn it now from the Swamp Witch. And again, she has no reason to attack or menace the PCs if she thinks that they want to use the altar. She wants people to use the altar. She's delighted by its evil or something. So, in Area 10, we have that altar, that evil altar grasped by roots. And if you're on Snake Venom, you see that there's even more roots and splintered wood all around it, and there's a cool little rhyming couplet or two that tells you how to use it. You gotta sacrifice someone, and then you get a wish. And this is the point of the adventure. There's a table on what happens when you make a wish, which is pretty cool, and I would definitely suggest using that. If the PCs didn't realize it yet, they should definitely know by now that the main point of this dungeon, again, is to abduct and sacrifice a human cultist from this horrible snake cult. And then they get to enjoy the weird effects of making a wish at the altar, which the GM can read for them. It's pretty fun. The only other thing to mention is Area 11, which has these two weird alien frog monsters who are very, very, very tough, would be peerless foes in combat. They would kill a party easy, and they want the croaking trident. If the PCs approach these two weird frog monsters without the trident, they'll probably just talk to them, and it'll only come to blows if the PCs start something. But if the PCs approach with the trident, these two frog monsters will demand that the PCs hand it over and fight if the PCs don't. They want that thing, and they'll fight to the death over it. And there you have it. That's the Mörk Borg adventure, Sepulchre of the Swamp Witch. What do you think? Do you have any more questions about it that I didn't answer? Let me know in the comments. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to do the internet things. Click like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon if you want to be notified about new videos on this channel. Look out for more Mörk Borg Heretic in the future, and thanks!